On the Record with WRAL News.
Thanks so much for joining us as we continue our candidate conversations for On the Record. I'm Lena Tillett. We are now 24 days away from the March primary. Here's the countdown clock to when polls open on March 5th in North Carolina. Early voting begins next week, February 15th, and ends March 2nd. Don't forget to bring your ID. Identification is required this year to vote. We have interviewed two of the top Democrats running for governor, former Supreme Court Justice Mike Morgan and current Attorney General Josh Stein. You will find three Republicans on the ballot in the governor's race: attorney and businessman Bill Graham, State Treasurer Dale Folwell, and Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. Tonight, we are sitting down with two of the candidates, Graham and Folwell. We should note we made repeated requests to interview Robinson. However, we never heard back from his campaign. Tonight, each candidate will have equal time for our interview. Let's begin with Treasurer Folwell. Dale Folwell is from Winston-Salem, North Carolina. He attended UNC Greensboro, receiving both a bachelor's and master's degree there. Folwell was elected to the State House in 2004, serving 4 terms. He was elected state treasurer in 2016 and is currently in his 2nd term. Treasurer Folwell, thank you so much for joining us. So you've won back-to-back statewide elections. You've also lost a couple in the past. Why run for governor now?
The root word of governor is to govern. And we've lost sight of what these words actually mean. The root word of conservative is to conserve, and the root word of liberal is to liberate. There's so much yet to fix in North Carolina, even though NC stands for nothing compares. And the governor is the CEO of the biggest business in the state. So all of your viewers, because this show is actually about what's the value to your viewers who deal with DMV and foster care and the Board of Elections, DHHS, DOT, all those cabinet level positions report to the governor of North Carolina. My track record in public service is that I listen, I act, and I fix. And I focus on saving lives, saving minds, and saving money. And I look forward to doing that as the next governor of North Carolina, even though it's been a pleasure to be the keeper of the public purse, in charge of the retirement for so many who teach, protect, and serve. And you mentioned the last 2 elections. I received more votes than Donald Trump did in both of those elections.
Let's talk about the economy. Unemployment is incredibly low in North Carolina. North Carolina has been on a streak now for best place to do business in terms of some major rankings. And that has happened with split government, with a Democrat as governor and with a Republican-controlled legislature. Why do you think that should change?
It's not about that. What it's about is the strategy and discipline to put North Carolina in a position where nothing compares. AAA bond rating, one of only 13 states to have that. A reduction in our state debt by 60% over an 8-year period of time. No state can claim that. A elimination of the corporate income tax over the next few years. That has put North Carolina in a position for me to say that nothing compares. But the fact is there's more that needs to be fixed. If you look at the North Carolina Constitution, and that's very important to me as a constitutional governor, the first responsibility of the governor of North Carolina is to originate the budget. I'm going to do 2 things that no governor has ever done. One is we're going to, except for the pension, health care, and the interest on the debt, we're going to have a zero-based budget presented to the General Assembly. That means that you look at every program that's within the $30 billion budget, you take it to zero, and then you look at it to see if it's still necessary going forward. Secondly, which is most important for the next governor of North Carolina, we're going to have to figure out how to we're going to have to understand that we are connected to the federal government, who is an addict. They're addicted to money. They cannot balance a budget or pay down their debt. And we need to see exactly how vulnerable our North Carolina budget is to a federal government who continues to spend money they don't have. So these are just a couple of the actual things that a governor does, because the root word of governor is to govern.
To my question, though, it's, again, split government has seemed to work well, at least for the economy in North Carolina. Do you value having a variety of ideas at the table?
I value people like myself who will not look the other way when the powerful forces ask them to, who always advocate for the invisible, and who are always focused on not putting the mirror on themselves as a public official, which so many people do, but actually always pointing the mirror out toward the citizens and the taxpayers of North Carolina. The senator of North Carolina has not endorsed me. The president pro tem of the North Carolina Senate has not endorsed me. I don't know why they made their decisions, but my reputation is that I think inside the box, outside the box, and then when I figure out what direction we need to go in, we use both sides of the box. And sometimes when you do that, you ask a lot of tough questions. I've been the best treasurer money can't buy. I'll be the best governor money can't buy.
Let's talk about your views on abortion now. Obviously, there is now a 12-week ban in North Carolina on abortions, with some exceptions. Some conservatives were happy with the change. Others felt that much more should have been done. Do you support more restrictions? And if so, why?
I've always been pro-choice, except for the 3 exceptions. But it's important for your viewers, because that's what this show is about, that people don't come on this show and say something different than they've said elsewhere. The 3 exceptions are rape and incest and danger to the mother. I did say 5 months ago that if I had been the governor when that bill passed, that I would have signed it, because I have witnessed how much work went into getting that legislation to the governor's desk. So I'm pro-life, but the 3 exceptions, and more importantly, if I'd have been the governor when that bill passed, I would have signed it.
I want to clarify, because you said, and I'm not sure if you accidentally said this, you said, I have always been pro-choice. You've always been pro-choice?
Forgive me. Thank you. I've always been pro-life.
Okay.
Yes.
You could have been pro-choice, but I wanted
yes.
to let you clarify that.
Thank you. I've always been pro-life with the 3 exceptions, but I have said that if I were the governor when that bill came across from the General Assembly, that I would have signed it.
So if the legislature brings you, say, a heartbeat bill, which your opponent, Mark Robinson, supports, so a ban after about 6 weeks, would you sign that into law?
I would look at any bill that comes across my desk on this particular issue. I will say, since you brought up Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson's name, he was for abortion before your news station put sunshine on the fact that he had been involved in this. So my point is that I've always been consistent on this particular issue, and I will be consistent as the next governor of North Carolina.
Let's talk about your opponent, Mark Robinson. He obviously is right now, according to polls, the front runner in this race. And I've heard you cite your faith when you talk about why you've decided to get into this race, that you want to restore civility into politics again. Robinson, to many, has a very different approach, much more confrontational. Is there an audience for that, for more civility in your party right now?
The Republican Party that I joined nearly 50 years ago was based on conservatism, which means to save, common sense, not so common, courtesy, which means answering your phones at state government, humanity, humility, and ethics. And ethics is not just what you do when no one's watching. Ethics is what you do when the powerful forces of our society want you to look the other way. The Lieutenant Governor, Mark Robinson, has none of those qualities. That is the reason that I joined the Republican Party nearly 50 years ago. Anyone who's ever come in contact with him, sold him a car, rented him a house, even the taxpayers today, because he only shows up for work 10% of the time and refuses to show up for any job interview with your station or anywhere across North Carolina. Anyone who has come in contact with him has been fleeced and continues to be fleeced in his personal life, in his campaign finance life, and now he's fleecing the taxpayers.
Would you support him if he's the nominee?
He will not be the nominee.
If he is the nominee, would you support him?
That's a hypothetical question. I intend to win the primary and be the next governor of North Carolina, and that's where my focus is. My focus is not on someone who thinks that women do not have a place in our society, who thinks the Holocaust didn't exist, who thinks that the civil rights movement was about nothing. You know, it's very difficult to support someone who even asked the rhetorical question on Facebook, if you beat the bird dog hell out of your wife at the mall, is that still domestic violence? I would not support someone who thinks that way or says those things, because that is not the Republican Party that I joined nearly 50 years ago.
Treasurer Folwell, thank you so much for your time, and best of luck to you.
Thank you.
All right, coming up, we talk to another Republican candidate for governor, attorney and businessman, Bill Graham. Stay with us. Welcome back. We are continuing our conversations with Republican candidates running for governor. Here's a bit about attorney and businessman Bill Graham. Bill Graham was raised in Rowan County and went to Dunn High School in Harnett County. He attended Catawba College and Antioch University School of Law. Graham served as a prosecutor and trial attorney for decades, specializing in wrongful death cases. Graham ran unsuccessfully for governor in 2008. And Bill Graham is joining us now via Zoom on the road, busy campaigning. Thank you so much for your time. Mr. Graham, I mentioned there that you ran unsuccessfully for governor in 2008. What about this time and this moment made you want to run again?
Well, thank you for having me on your show. Yeah, the primary reason for this time is we're at a pivot point with the Republican Party in our state at large. And I looked at the field of candidates and was convinced after doing some significant due diligence that the candidates that were running couldn't win the general election. I believe I can win the general election. And so I think in the primary, our goal here is to select a candidate from the Republican Party that can beat the Democratic nominee. And I think I can do that. So that's why I'm running. The other thing that I've told the Republican faithful is I'm sick and tired of losing the governor's race. And we've only had a Republican governor here in North Carolina once out of the last 32 years. And so I'm aiming to change that for all of North Carolina.
At least in the national business community, one of the positives about North Carolina's business environment is that there is a split government in our state. So with a Democrat in the governor's office and a Republican-controlled legislature, why do you think that should change?
Well, because of it reduces the amount of friction between the governor's office and the General Assembly when they're not on the same page, which has been often. I don't think it's a positive to have split government if you're a businessman and you're trying to get regulations reduced, or you're trying to get taxes lowered, or you're trying to secure funding for one project or another, or approval. I don't think split government is good for business in that arena. So I think if they had folks that were Republican in the governor's office, we could get more done. This state is challenged in many ways. We do have a good business environment, but we could have a better business environment with lower regulations and lower taxes.
You've made combating crime a priority. In a recent campaign ad on public safety, which we're showing right now, it shows images of some really dramatic crimes that have happened in North Carolina. And then you say about criminals, quote, as governor, I'll put them in jail or put them in the ground. What do you mean by that?
Well, I want to get tough on crime, and particularly the fentanyl that's coming across our border. This is a horrific event in the history of the state to have such, unchecked immigration and unchecked things coming across our border like fentanyl. And I want to send the message to the general public that I understand and I hear them, that they don't feel safe at school. They don't feel safe in their homes. They don't feel safe in their cars and their communities. They don't feel safe there. So I'm a former prosecutor, and I want to get tough on crime. And the ad is intended to convey my seriousness in that arena, and I'm not going to back off.
To be clear, on what authority could you put criminals in the ground, and what kind of criminals?
Well, those criminals that commit capital offenses and those criminals that traffic in deadly drugs. Fentanyl is a horrifically deadly and toxic substance, and it can kill you actually faster than a bullet can. So I'm serious about reducing crime and serious about going after criminals. And we have too many people that are being let out of our prison system, back on the streets, back committing crime. I experienced that firsthand as a former prosecutor, and I want to end that practice.
Would you then be trying to lobby prosecutors to get or decide on capital punishment? I mean, how would you do that as governor?
Well, you have to send a clear message to the prosecutors, the assistant prosecutors. You have to set the tone that we're going to get tough on crime, and you have to get the public involved and help the police and the sheriff's departments all across the state. Look, they've been vilified across the country, and particularly here in North Carolina. And I was talking about being sick and tired. I'm sick and tired of that. My dad was the former police officer, lieutenant, and my uncle was a former county sheriff for 30 or 40 years. So I come from a law enforcement background, and again, former prosecutor, tough on crime.
Let's talk about your opponent, Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson. In a recent interview, you said that you did not think that Mark Robinson could win in a general election. You kind of alluded to that at the beginning of this interview as well. I want to know why you say that.
Well, just listen to what he says. I mean, who in their right mind thinks that Mark Robinson can go out there and be anti-Semitic, say the things that he said about the Jewish community, say the things that he said about women being second class or subservient to men? Who thinks that candidate can carry the day for the Republican Party in a general election? Certainly not me, and the folks that I've talked to certainly feel the same.
Senator Tom Tillis has endorsed you. That was a very big endorsement. A lot of state Republicans, though top state Republicans, have endorsed Governor Robinson, Lieutenant Governor Robinson. What do you make about that?
Not much. I mean, I welcome the endorsement, but the fact of the matter is, folks, when they go into the voting booth, they don't think about the endorsements. They're trying to think about who the candidate is going to be that best represents them and their. I think when talking about the booth and pick a candidate that's strong crime, their economic future at heart. When I've asked for lower taxes on food and overtime, actually no tax on food to fight higher grocery prices, and safer communities. Stop indoctrinating our kids at school. I've told audiences that kids belong to their parents, not the school system. So I think that's the kind of future that the conservative future that folks want to see, not somebody on the stump that hopes to be the nominee that says outlandish things expecting the public to endorse them. They're not going to do that.
I wanted to ask you one final question, and just for transparency, your picture is freezing a bit, but we can hear you. So we are showing some video of folks voting over the years. I wanted to ask your views on abortion, though. Right now, obviously, there's a 12-week abortion ban with some exceptions. Mark Robinson has said that he would support a ban after 6 weeks. Would you support a ban after 6 weeks?
I support the law that the General Assembly passed. And by the way, it's not a ban, it's an allowance or a period of an allowance period. I'm pro-life. I support the law that the General Assembly passed. I think it was a considered and compassionate rule and law, and I support it.
All right. Mr. Graham, thank you so much for your time. We were able at least to hear you, even though the shot got a little frozen, but we appreciate your time and best of luck in the weeks ahead.
Thank you for having me on. Take care.
Thank you. All right, coming up, Meredith College just released a new poll ahead of the March primary. We sit down with Meredith professor David McLennan about what it shows and what the candidates need to do to close the gap. Welcome back. Meredith College is out with several new polls this week. The numbers favoring Lieutenant Governor Mark Robinson with a commanding lead of 34% in this race right now over Bill Graham with 9%, and State Treasurer Dale Folwell at 4% here. 42% of voters, though, are undecided for the Republican primary. Meredith College professor David McLennan is joining us now to reflect on this and also a bit on what we heard. I thought it was interesting in both of the interviews that essentially Treasurer Folwell and Mr. Graham said that they did not think that Mark Robinson could win in a general election. What do you make of that?
Well, there's not a lot of evidence for what they're claiming. I mean, the race between Robinson and the Democratic nominee is fairly close. And so, and even in matchup polls that other polling organizations have done between Mr. Folwell and Mr. Graham and Mr. Sine, for example, don't necessarily say they're they can win more easily. So I think it's a case that you hear them making out on the campaign trail. I'm just not sure it's resonating with voters.
We've seen some recent campaign ads that have been more targeted against Robinson in recent weeks, but it seems like it's kind of all of a sudden, and it took a while to get here. What was the fear, do you think, of really going at Robinson, who has such a commanding lead?
Well, I think that's the fear, is that he has, a strong base, and he's got the endorsement of Donald Trump, who is also obviously running well in the state of North Carolina. I think it could be, with 3 weeks left in the election cycle, maybe a little too late. This would be something that the candidates could have started in the fall and maybe made some headway against Mark Robinson. But, I think early voting starts next week, in-person early voting. And I think voters are starting to pay attention, and it may be too late to cut into Robinson's lead.
What do you make of that 42% of undecided voters, though? I mean, that's a considerable block there.
It is a considerable block, and it's been very consistent since the fall. I think North Carolina voters are late deciders this year. The presidential campaign is sort of overshadowing everything. But, many late deciders tend to go with the front runner. And that's the danger for Bill Graham or Dale Folwell, is that these people might look at Mark Robinson as the front runner and say, well, I'd rather go with the winner than someone who's not going to win. So again, I think it's a case of, we're late in the election cycle, and even though there are a lot of undecided voters, they may not be truly considering Bill Graham or Dale Folwell at this time.
Treasurer Folwell said that Robinson does not show up to job interviews, essentially talking about going to interviews with the media to answer questions about his policies and also what he has said over the years. That does not seem to impact him much. What do you make of the fact that he doesn't answer questions of the media or really anyone?
Oh, I think the fact that he doesn't do debates, he doesn't do media interviews, it's a safe strategy for someone who's got a lead in the polls, but it may not work well for him in the general election if it does work well for him in the primary. He can't avoid the tough questions, and I think when the attention gets placed on him more significantly in the general election, he may have to answer for some of his previous statements or his policy positions.
Let's really quickly take a look at the Democratic side, because your poll also looked at that. Attorney General Josh Stein also with a commanding lead here, 31% to Sherrell Booker at 5% and Justice Mike Morgan at 4%. Any belief that they could kind of close that gap, the two candidates below Stein at this point?
It's very similar to the Republican race, even though there are a lot of undecideds in this particular race, over 50%. I just think that on the Democratic side, Josh Stein has been doing this. He's been campaigning for a while. He's got the endorsement of the governor. I think those things might play a significant role as we get close to March 5th. So it'd be hard for me to see any one of his two challengers making up that difference.
Professor McLennan, thank you so much for your time. If you want to see more in this poll, including the poll looks at the White House, the race for the White House as well, you can go to WRAL.com. We have a full breakdown there. If you have something to say about tonight's discussion, you can email us at ontherecord@WRAL.com or find me on social media. Have a great evening.